Hi, this is Tamsen Granger.
This is Dan Abuhoff.
With Tamsen and Dan read the paper on Monday,
July 29.
2019. Week 2 at Block Island, Rhode Island.
Right.
Family vacation
Right.
of the Abuhoffs.
Cast of thousands for the podcast.
Exactly. Let me introduce. We have Bryce and Lorna and Granger and Nico and Sadie, in addition to Dan and Tamsen.
Exactly.
And Bryce and Lorna flew here from South Carolina.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
Bryce pilots his own aircraft, and he came in right on schedule last night, yesterday evening, 6 o'clock. How'd you like the airport, Bryce?
Oh, it was very nice. It's very, very adequate.
Very adequate. They're high praise from the pilot himself. So he'll be back many times,
Smooth
I'm
flight?
sure.
Oh, yeah.
Although he had a few snarky things to say about the New York tower control people.
Traffic control, yeah.
Traffic control, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
they're a little bit quick in talking and expect you to understand exactly what they're saying all the time.
Even though they say it in New Yorkese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's not like you have to hear everything they're saying. They're only air traffic control. I mean, if you get 60% of what they're saying, you're probably going to be close enough for the landing. You think,
Yeah,
right?
they want 100%.
Yeah, really. Anyway, we're glad you made it. And, of course, Nico and Granger have been here a few days. They came in more conventional ways on the ferry. Sadie been here during the duration with me and Tamsen. And, of course, a regular guest, a veteran podcast guest. Right?
May I just say,
yes,
the weather has been spectacular.
It is amazing, yes.
It's been warm. It's been sunny.
And it's a great vacation.
We've been beaching it every day.
It's been a great vacation.
Yes.
It's been a great vacation.
So first impressions of Block Island. Lorna.
The water's really cold, but it's a lot more... There's a lot more vegetation than I expected. I expected more sand and bluffs and rocks, and it's quite beautiful. All the flowers and bushes and shrubs.
All the houses are gray.
Yes,
you know,
most of them.
A lot of foliage, and you know, it's really an amazing sort of New England kind of landscape, and a lot of hills. What do you think, Bryce?
Oh, I thought it had a little bit of flavor of being away from the usual mainland. It almost has like a Europe-y flavor to it.
It's like being in another world.
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah, exactly.
More like Europe in like the 12th century. But yes, sometime before the invention of restaurants. But
and Wi-Fi.
And Wi-Fi, that's for sure. Yeah. It has an otherworldly feel to it. It's different. And it's funny. It's physically, it's an island. And once you step on the island, you are in a different place. So it's physically and virtually, it's us connected. But so here we go. So here's something that's also disconnected. If I can,
we didn't get any impressions from Nico and Granger.
All right, go ahead.
You've been here many times.
They're veterans.
But,
they're like Block Island natives.
How does the island strike you this time?
This is the best weather we've had at Block Island.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you've taken advantage of it. You've been in the water every second.
Yeah, we did some swimming. We've enjoyed the beach. We've gone running. Nico's gone biking.
Yeah, I'm learning more of the island, biking, getting lost, biking again, getting more lost, and then finally figuring out the roads, even though there's only 3 of them.
And the hills. The hills are small, but they're deadly, aren't they?
Yes. And they're one after another. Yeah. Lots of hills, short hills,
and
steep hills.
There's no downhill. That's the amazing thing. It's just one uphill after another.
No, there are downhills.
Oh, you gave it away, yes.
But the problem is if you have to come back home, there's always an uphill.
That's right.
But we didn't mention the big day Saturday.
Oh, yes.
Sadie swam in the Great Salt Pond.
The reason we're
mile swim.
The reason we're here, yes.
And how was that this year, Sadie?
Well, I had to brave it by myself this year because Mom was not a willing participant. But it was perfect.
I wasn't a participant at all, willing or otherwise. I sat this one out.
Yes. But it was perfect conditions, which we have never seen before. And I think that was because, Mom, you were not part of it. They said, Tamsen's not coming. Okay, the sky will be clear.
Yes, it was a beautiful day. And it's we should say it's a mile-long swim in the salt pond, which seems like it would be pristine and easy swimming. But I understand sometimes the water can be a little bit rough, and it's not perfect conditions for swimming, right?
Also, someone next to me almost took me out. They were trying to grab at my feet. It's rough in there.
Yeah.
It's a difficult race. It's every
competitive.
man for themselves.
Right.
It is an
It
odd
turns
group
out
of
a
people.
mile is a fairly long way to
It
swim.
is a long way to swim.
Yes, it is a long way.
And
Every time you look up at a buoy, it seems very far away.
But then when you walk around town afterwards and you had the magic marker on your arm with your starting time and your number, people noticed you.
did you get reactions to that? I didn't.
None. No.
Wait, no, that's not true. A lady pulled over in a car.
Oh, yes, and asked me how the race was.
Yes, in a car. Pulled over, stopped traffic
That's right.
to chat her up. And she has a medal.
I'm basically a local celebrity now.
Yeah.
Let's just face it.
And huge swag. So it was all.
All right, what did you want to tell us about? That
look,
was so important.
This what got me going last week. I have to. It seems otherworldly, a little bit like Block Island. There's a Dutch tradition, which sadly enough is called droppings. But what's dropped are children, pre-teenage children, are dropped in the woods, almost like a scout exercise. But it's a rite of passage for all Dutch children, and they are not given much in the way of directions. They're given what's called a primitive GPS, which seems to me a contradiction in terms, but in any event, something but not much of a clue of where to go. It's near midnight, and they're pushed into the woods and told to find the base. And these 11-year-old, 12-year-olds wander around, often for hours. Sometimes their trip made a little more frightening by parents and leaders hiding in the bushes and making animal-like sounds, until they eventually stagger, completely disoriented, to the base. And that's the rite of passage. It's called droppings. And they say that it doesn't make any sense unless you're Dutch, because that's the way the Dutch think of childhood. The Dutch say that children are taught, and I'm reading from the article now, taught not to depend too much on adults. Adults are taught to allow children to solve their own problems. Droppings distill these principles into an extreme form, banking on the idea that even for children who are tired, hungry, and disoriented, there is a compensatory thrill to being in charge.
This really reminds me a great deal of our children making their way home from Cranberry School in the late afternoon winter.
Listen, this is
Tired,
crazy.
hungry, a
We
little
walk-
confused.
We walk to and from school every day by ourselves.
Yeah. Look, I don't doubt that they were a little confused, but here, I thought this was insane. And they do manage to interview one American who says this is insane and it's child abuse and whatever. But
Listen, we've been to the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And the Dutch seem very competent.
I was going to say,
Am I wrong?
aren't
Am
they
I
kind
wrong?
of an elevated group of beings?
It may well be.
Well, look, is
You should see
everybody
them on the
okay with
bikes.
this? This all makes sense to everybody?
I actually agree with it.
All right, there you go.
So there you go.
How long are they?
Oh, well, I didn't mention sometimes they're blindfolded.
Oh no!
No.
Now that's going over the line.
No, not in the woods, but they're blindfolded in the car, so that when they're driven there, they'll have no idea where they are.
How could they read the GPS if they're blindfolded?
Well, how long would it take them to figure out to take the blindfold off?
The
So
Dutch,
Lorna,
a hardy group.
Bryce, you're for it all?
Yeah, I'd have to say I don't object to it.
Oh, there you go. Nico and Granger. Nico's shocked. There you go. They don't do this in your background?
No.
There's no cultural match for this?
Latinos really like coddling their children.
All right.
You know, very touchy-feely, making sure it don't fall here.
All right.
Yeah,
Well, then
whatever.
there's a different point. I was hoping someone would express a
and yet
different
it's the
point.
Dutch who are taking over the world.
There's no evidence of the Dutch taking over the world.
That's
None.
true.
It's
That's
none.
true.
It's quite the contrary.
They've reached a level where they know they don't have to take over the world.
They're very
They're
mature.
okay with
They're
that.
most-
They can find their way out of the woods.
How common is this?
They say it's common. It's standard operating procedure in the Netherlands.
Like every family?
No, there's no such thing as every family, but let's say it's at least, and I think even more so, as common as scouting is in the U.S., but I get the sense that scouting is actually more commonplace and more popular even in the Netherlands than it is here, and it's a scouting event.
You know,
Yeah.
isn't there that thing in Norway where the high school graduates
Yes.
go out and drink like crazy
Right.
and find their ways home
Right.
afterwards?
They drink themselves senseless.
It's a little different.
Yeah.
It's a little different, but not entirely different. Look, it's different. It's different.
It's kind of like their bar mitzvah. I gotta tell you, when I was 13, if we had blindfolded Isaac Yokelson, left him in the woods, we never would have seen him again.
That's true. That's true.
Little shout out to Isaac.
Exactly.
Yeah, Isaac.
The name Isaac Yokelson doesn't appear in this article, but if it did, it would be in that
The
context.
Olsons have way
All right,
in this
moving
week.
right along.
There are a couple of sad stories about this, but in any event, that's the way they do it.
Oh, really? Sometimes it goes bad?
Yeah, but not as bad as I thought. There have been a couple of automobile accidents, but there haven't been situations where, and then of course there's been scandal, but there haven't been situations where a kid was found 6 weeks later or something like that. That hasn't happened. Sometimes, overnight.
Nobody just let their kids
Oh, my God.
take 6 weeks to come home.
No.
They're Dutch. They're not stupid.
Oh, look,
Yeah,
I
they're
just had to
Dutch.
get that out. I've been sitting with this, steaming about it for a few days, but I'm glad that.
Okay,
I sort of like it.
All right.
not a big article here, but one in the New York Times magazine section about Arcadia Publishing. Now, actually, and we are all familiar with what this Kathleen Rooney is writing about. It's these little books. She's writing about these photographic histories of various towns and areas. You've seen them. You've seen them in the bookstore, and it will have like Cranberry, New Jersey, and it will have vintage photographs collected from the community all throughout, and they're from every state. In fact, this was started it's a South Carolina-based business, started in 1993. And they have, all 50 states are represented. In fact, there are 15,000 titles in print. And, we're here in Block Island. I have several of these books at home. And they're about every possible town in New Jersey.
They have
I
some
think.
text in them besides photographs.
They
It's
have-
not just
yeah,
photographs.
not a whole lot of text.
Right.
But they really have acted as little sort of photo albums for the history of your town.
Right.
And it's just kind of amazing that somebody's made a business out of this, and it's a big business.
Really?
And, it's the article isn't that positive about the quality of the text or anything.
Right.
They say they risk being a little bit boring, probably if you're not invested in the community. But when we get back to civilization, I'll show you.
Well,
one of
but
the
I think
books.
it's like you were showing us the pictures yesterday of Tamsen and Bryce's family growing up. I mean, it's that kind of thing, but it's the story of a town. And I think one of the points made in the article, whether it helps them sell books or not, is that, what's history? In a sense, what they're saying is what's history is the way people live their lives, and it's the mundane way they live their lives. So the story is, and here's where the power plant opened, and here's when there was the big fire at so-and-so place in 1927. And these events don't make it into world history books, but this is the way people live their lives, and this is actually the living history. It's
And-
the point.
One of the books I bought was the something about the inns of Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
Really?
And it shows all these, various eating establishments from way far back up to the present. And it's very nostalgic. Mm-hmm. You're right. It's a way of telling history.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So here's a fellow named Hugh Southern died. And he's a director of certain cultural institutions in the U.S. But what he did begin, he founded, was the TKTS booth, the tickets booth in Broadway. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. I'm looking
No.
at Bryce and Lorna. So
In the middle of Times Square, 47th
Square.
Street or
Well,
whatever.
Duffy Square, yeah.
Duffy Square. There's a row of windows,
Yeah.
and people line up to buy,
Yeah, Nico's not. You guys are familiar with that, right?
essentially half-price tickets to Broadway shows.
Well, that's the idea.
Whatever Broadway shows haven't sold out, you can line up and get them at a bargain rate.
Right.
And sometimes it's fabulous. You get to see great stuff
Well,
at a cheap price.
yeah.
And sometimes, to be honest, we've stood for hours.
And not done well. So it started in 1973. So this guy was the head of what's called the Theater Development Fund, and John Lindsay was mayor, and they were trying to boost the sales of Broadway shows. And they said, look, Broadway shows are expensive. We have some empty seats. Can we fill the seats by selling some tickets half price? And they set up a trailer on 47th Street. And they listed the shows that they had that were being offered half-price tickets. And initially, people fought it. The theater owners fought it. They said, no, once people know there's half-price, they won't pay full price. They said, no, it's different. The people want to plan and want to come from out of town, whatever. They have to have the tickets in hand. They have to know their seats and everything. But, this is spur of the moment. And it will be a chance to fill the theaters. And it works. The theaters are filled. But what surprised me about it, and Tamsen's right, it's a mixed experience because it's gotten more complicated. So sometimes you wait online and it's not half price, it's 2/3 price, or it's 3/4 price, or it's half price of the most expensive ticket. You didn't know such an expensive ticket existed, or there's all kinds of
half
glitches.
price for a ticket that's $189.
It's $90.
It's still a lot of money.
But in any event, that's the concept. But here's what's interesting to me. Sometimes I'm sitting down at a show, and I'm looking around, and you see a lot of people from out of town in particular, and you say, yeah, those people bought this at the TKTS ticket booth. I hope they know what they're getting into, because I know that this play is not necessarily for everybody. We'll see. And in my head, I think I have a general sense of what percentage of TKTS purchasers are in the theater. And I tend to think it's like 25% for a lot of performances, or even more. But what's your guess as to what it is? Because they have the figure here, so what percentage?
I don't
of
even
seats?
have a guess, but tell me the figure.
I think it depends on the type, because I saw Mamma Mia from a TKTS purchase, and I feel like that's probably 50% TKTS every day. I feel like those long-standing musicals that just need to fill the theater, those are more so like Jersey Boys, things like that.
Right.
But if you have something like Hamilton, obviously that's not selling anything.
Well, that's a good point. So maybe so it's a really low number. It turns out that TKTS accounts for 8% of the seats on Broadway.
But I think Sadie has a good point.
But Sadie's
0% for some things and 50% for other things.
But also, I think what's happened since they introduced TKTS is that there are additional discount plans that have gone into place. There are other ways to get discount tickets for Broadway other than TKTS. So a lot of people are buying discount tickets the day of, or the 2 days before, even a week before, and they're not using the TKTS booth. So I almost feel like, notwithstanding that it's only 8%, it's a little bit like an airline. And when you're sitting there in a commercial airline, no one knows this, but Lorna's nodding at what I'm saying, that everyone's paying a different price. And it's not
like hotels as well.
Yeah, hotel. That's right. It's a different price. It's a way to price discriminate. That's what price discrimination is. That you have different prices, and people pay as much as they are willing to pay, and that actually helps the seller.
But do people feel it was a success?
Oh yeah, that's why his obituary is in the Times. There's no other reason.
Okay,
it's because that institution has flourished.
And his name?
His name is Hugh Southern.
So that was sort of like the early price line for all that stuff.
Yeah.
So he really invented a new genre of how to buy.
Well, that's exactly right.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. And that's why it was considered such people protested. They said, no. Well, what are you doing? You're giving our product away. And he's saying, actually, it will benefit you because, and that's true. Price discrimination feels like the buyer is being benefited because the buyer is only paying what the buyer wants to pay, but it really benefits the seller. Because like you were talking earlier today about what we call sometimes a Dutch auction, Bryce, in which the price, you snatch the price as it goes down. It's the same idea. The seller has to choose a price that they think is optimal. And because of the pressure of trying to appeal to a wide enough audience, the seller will generally go to a lower price than he otherwise would be comfortable with. If the seller can price discriminate, they'll charge the people most interested a much higher price than that. And they'll basically tier it in such a way so that maximum revenue goes to the seller. And that's what TKTS did for the sellers of Broadway shows. The other thing I should mention about Broadway, and I don't know who's going to respond to this, but who's familiar with Meatloaf, Bat Out of Hell?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm raising my hand.
Mom is a huge Meatloaf fan.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Bryce too? Lorna?
Classic.
Oh, everybody's on to that? All right. Good news for everybody. It's going to be a Broadway show.
Wow.
Well, maybe
Well,
not
it's
Broadway.
already it's already a show.
It's a show.
It's been touring for years. It's finally
2
going
years.
to get to Broadway.
And it's going to,
hasn't
be City
Meatloaf
Center.
always been a show?
He has. But, that's full disclosure. Meatloaf's not in it.
Wait a minute. Is it 1 out of 3 ain't bad or 2 out of 3?
2 out of 3 ain't
All
bad.
right, just-
1 out of 3 is bad. Just so we're clear for the future.
Well, Meatloaf's style of singing, I think, would lend itself well to theatrical performance.
Well, here's what apparently Jim Steinman, the guy who wrote it, and Meatloaf have been feuding on and off for years. And now they're not feuding. So now they're saying nice things about each other, even though they sued each other in the past. And what Jim Steinman says is that Meatloaf, in his mind, is one of the great singers. He literally says in this article that he lends an operatic quality to his performance, and therefore it's hard to match him. And Meatloaf himself is quoted in this article is saying, it's kind of a great quote. He said that, he says that he only felt pride at seeing the show's cast perform it in London. Quote, "Nobody will ever do it the way I do it," he said. "It's not a jealousy thing or an ego thing. It's just how I do things. People don't do them that way." And there's something to that. But this cast is going to do what it can do.
So my question is it a jukebox musical in the sense that there's a storyline that goes with the... There's a storyline that goes with the music?
Yes, but I always thought that album had a storyline that went with it.
Right, so I think it's kind of like Moving Out, the Billy Joel
I think it's
musical,
kind of like Tommy, actually. Tommy, which was a rock opera, and it was set up that way from the beginning with. This was almost set up that way to begin with.
Well, yeah, but, I mean, have you seen Moving Out? I feel like you haven't.
Well, Moving Out was the best because it was a Twyla Tharp jukebox musical. So,
but I'm just saying that's different than like Jersey Boys, where it's just kind of interspersed within.
No, I agree with that. Twyla Tharp made it different, and that's why that does stand on a different plane. So I agree with that. But I think this was conceived from the beginning in the way that Billy Joel didn't, of putting these songs on the Bat Out of Hell album in a way that they made sense as a story from the outset.
Kind of like American Idiot, actually, by Green Day. That's the way that album was.
Is that right?
Supposed to function, so I don't know and it went to Broadway like
all right,
that.
Well, okay.
And it was a success on Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was. All right. So that's all I have from Broadway, Tamsen.
All right, now going to the Ivory Coast, to Abidjan. I can't really pronounce that properly, I am sure. And this is an interesting project, okay? In this city, women supplement their family incomes by collecting recyclables. And so they may go out at night and throughout the neighborhoods and collect recyclables and then sell them to a middleman, and then they go into recycling. There's a lot of garbage here, a lot of plastic waste, approximately 300 tons per day. And as it stands now, I lost the number. 5% of it is recycled. Okay, but good news may be on the horizon in a couple of different aspects. Dr. Campo, a medical doctor who just ended a term as the Ivory Coast representative for UNICEF, has recruited Conceptos Plásticos, a for-profit plastic recycling company with a social mission of building housing and creating jobs for poor people. And he has contracted them to create plastic bricks to be used in building classrooms in this town in the Ivory Coast. And there's this huge need for classrooms. Right now, more than 90 kids may be crammed in one little room. And Conceptos Plásticos has been contracted to deliver 528 rooms for about 26,000 students at 50 students per room. So this has a couple of good effects. One is these superior classrooms, all right? The plastic bricks will probably last forever, right? Like our plastic bags in the landfill, okay? They are fire retardant, stay cool in hot weather, so they seem like a superior solution to this problem. Plus, to make the plastic bricks, you need more plastic. You need more, there's more of a demand for these recyclables. So these women anticipate being able to get higher prices for the things they are collecting. Now, these women are pretty interesting. In fact, they have an association called the Fighting Women. And they support each other, and they pool some of their, profits, their income from selling the recyclables to a middleman to be used distributed to women who are ill or whatever. I mean, it's quite an interesting organization, but they also, feel that this new demand will be giving them a new market and hopefully will be increasing the prices. There is some hope that the recycling itself will go up to, I don't know, each classroom takes about 5 tons in and of itself. So it's an interesting project. It's an interesting company. Oscar Mendez and his wife, Isabel Gomez. It has an A.
She said Gomez.
Gomez?
Yeah.
Gomez, okay. Will be moving to the Ivory Coast to set up this business. And I think it's just fascinating. And did you notice it's for profit? Mm-hmm. Okay, which I think is interesting as well.
They also indicated in there sometime they're going to open a factory there sometime. Yeah. Also.
Well, that's the deal of it. Yeah. They are coming to the Ivory Coast to open that factory, and they're going to have a direct use, a direct, sort of end use for those women collecting the recyclables. Before all this happened, the leader of the Fighting Women had been considering a new line of work, selling cold drinks. But now, she says, we think there is a future in plastic.
Does that mean we can use plastic bags again at the supermarket? Is that where this is going?
No, but it does mean, I mean, you're being a little flip about this, but, this variety is of plastics, and the article does also point out that this kind of use actually makes use of different kinds of plastics that aren't often used, like snack packaging and cell phone parts. Yeah. So, I mean, we really have to find some way to deal with all this garbage we're creating.
All right. Well, listen, I have a story that can match you in terms of trash. That can be right up there. All right.
Dueling trash story?
Yes, and here it is. I'm going to show this photograph, which is not going to look like too much. That is a picture of an In-N-Out burger in a paper wrapping, which was found, I believe, in New York, was photographed, and was put on social media, and according to the Times at least, who has a limited knowledge of such phrases, became a so-called viral sensation.
Because it floated all the way from California?
No.
It's an actual burger. It's not the institution.
No, you're right.
When you say it's an In-N-Out burger, I think, it's a
and
restaurant.
Yet, In-N-Out burger seems descriptive to me. But in any event, it's an In-N-Out burger from the In-N-Out people who make burgers, and it was photographed here, and the reaction of one Lincoln Baim, who I don't know anything about him, neither does the New York Times, was that, quote, it was like stumbling upon a work of art. It was like seeing the Mona Lisa for the first time at the Louvre. There was so much excitement by certain people that an In-N-Out burger was spotted on the East Coast because it meant to many people that In-N-Out was finally going to open on the East Coast. And there was all kinds of reaction, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez weighed in about what this means in terms of In-N-Out coming to the East Coast. And it turns out that In-N-Out is not coming to the East Coast, notwithstanding all the excitement and all the publicity. Here's what happened. The mystery was solved on Wednesday after a 16-year-old high school student named Helen Vivas came forward to say that the burger had been hers. On the last day of a recent vacation, Ms. Vivas bought 4 In-N-Out burgers in San Diego before she flew home, keeping her precious cargo in a tightly wrapped paper bag. Well, the story is she ran to catch a bus when she got to New York. One of the burgers came loose and landed on the street. And she realized later when she reached for that burger, it wasn't there. But that burger became photographed and became the famous burger. And it caused all this stir because this poor girl, poor 16-year-old girl, dropped a hamburger in New York. And they end the article by quoting Ms. Vivas, who's somewhat apologetic. I'm only 16, Ms. Vivas said. I never expected to get so much attention over a burger I dropped in the street.
Why? That doesn't happen until you're 17?
It depends. If you're in the Netherlands, what they do is they blindfold a burger and then they just put it out there and they hope it finds its way home.
See what child picks it up.
That's pretty funny though when you think about it. That this kid.
If you believe the story.
You think it's not true? You think it's a
I think
plant?
it's 50-50. Ms. Vivas took the picture herself.
Well,
Even so, I don't know. But what does she get out of it?
if you've ever flown to California, especially through LAX,
Yeah.
you know the first thing you do when you get there is you go to the In-N-Out Burger right next door, and the last thing you do before you leave is you go to the In-N-Out Burger right next door.
Yeah.
So
I disagree.
I think
I
it-
totally disagree. You go to See's Candy first.
Well, I've
See's
heard of.
candy you can get anywhere now.
No,
Yeah,
you can't.
you can get it on the internet. You can certainly order it. But
All
in
right,
any event,
guys, move. Let's
are
get
we all?
into it.
But are,
Tradition. So
everyone's
I-
here had In-N-Out Burger.
Yes.
Yes. All right. We're all fans.
No.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
great.
There's a million other burgers better than that.
All right. There you go. It's like 8 out of 10 dentists recommend. Yeah, it's the same idea. All right. Well, in any event, go ahead, Tamsen.
Ding, ding, ding. Arts update.
Yeah, the arts update.
The arts
Everyone waits
update.
for this. Everyone kind of listens quietly through most of this, and then.
Well, I think people have been reading about. There's a series of murals in a high school in San Francisco, and the name of the high school is George Washington. And the murals are about his life and times, and there are several depictions of things like slaves working in his Mount Vernon fields and the killing of Indians by early Americans as well. So there's been an uproar. There's students have been
Good.
asking to have these offensive images covered up, destroyed, whatever. And so this is an article, basically an op-ed article, I would call it, by Roberta Smith, art critic for The Times, addressing, this whole issue. I mean, what do you do with this stuff? And she mentions that, it's been coming up forever. You may remember at Rockefeller Center that John D. Rockefeller destroyed a mural by the famous Mexican artist, Diego Rivera, because it depicted, communism, communist heroes in a positive light. So this is not a new issue. Rivera got very pissed off, and he said, if somebody new buys the Sistine Chapel and decides to paint that over or destroy it, should that be allowed? Regardless of who owns the building, who really owns the art. And
Yeah, I don't think Rivera has much of a point there, honestly. But
I do.
no, I mean
Daniel.
I don't. It's not like the art exists. If someone buys the art, they can do what they want with the art. No one's going to buy anything that's for the purpose of destroying, though. I don't think you're going to worry too much about that. But the thing is, as we were discussing before, I mean,
So the issue had come up before with this particular mural.
This is different from the
this had
Rivera
come up
thing.
before in the 60s and 70s with the Black Panthers.
Right.
And others who said these are offensive images. And so it was looked into, and actually they hired an artist, Dewey Crumpler, to paint new murals. And he went to Mexico, and he looked at the famous murals by Rivera and others. And he came back, and he agreed to do that, as you know, only on the condition that these old murals would not be destroyed.
Right.
And he painted a new series of murals that actually, according to Roberta Smith, are metaphorical, imposing in scale, startlingly dynamic panoramas paying tribute to the achievements and cultures of Black, Native American, Hispanic, and Asian peoples. Their fiery images show immense chains being broken and historic figures such as Reverend Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, etc. Mr. Crumpler, the artist, said that art's responsibility is to tell the truth. He added that to destroy those earlier murals would destroy his work as well.
Yeah. Well, look, I think there are two things that kind of make this unique and make the whole thing silly about whitewashing the walls. The first is that the artist, did you mention his name? Because I can't remember.
The artist, a Russian emigre
Right.
and communist named Viktor
Right.
Arnotov.
Right. So Victor. But as you say, the key thing, he was a communist. He wasn't really endorsing anything about the vision of America that's reflected in the history of George
Actually,
Washington.
he was giving a more truthful image
Exactly.
of what the father of our country
Exactly. So when people
was like.
so to sit here and say, "Oh my God, this is like American propaganda. We're whitewashing in a virtual sense what happened 200 years ago," and endorsing it, he wasn't doing that at all. He was actually he went to the trouble of showing slaves and showing the Native Americans because he thought that was an issue that people ought to deal with. So from the very outset, the artist didn't intend to put something in there that was positive on that score, such that it would have to be eradicated later. And number two, of course, when Crumpler looks at this, maybe Crumpler understands this, or maybe Crumpler just takes the higher ground and says, look, whatever this fellow's point of view was, or whatever people draw from this art, it seems to me that it is what it is. And I'm going to respond to it, and people might draw something else. But my work is only going to mean something in the context of seeing this work, this counterpart work. And therefore, he said he only agreed to do it, as you said a moment ago, Tamsen, on the condition that, in fact, the original work would not be destroyed. So the whole meaning, even of his work, is tied up with the first work, which makes it even doubly wrong-headed to get rid of the first work. So the whole thing doesn't make any sense. It's just because of people's heightened sensitivities and perhaps lack of real understanding of what was going on here that they want to pull out the rug from under this and whitewash the wall. So it's a pretty poor example of people trying to sort of correct history. And it does feel like it's political correctness triumphing over anything that's substantive here. So,
Except the
I
end
don't think so. Except it doesn't get destroyed.
it shouldn't get destroyed.
Right.
I agree with that.
She does mention an example of like the history of Columbus in Notre Dame, where they painted over.
Yeah.
They made it reversible. But she also brings up people's point of view and opinions change.
Yes,
Evolution.
But that's not this situation. That's the funny thing, because the guy who wrote it probably did have the point of view that Washington was doing it incorrectly to begin with. So that's why I think it's not the best example of the tough
It's
situation.
not a consistent example, but it's a good result.
What was the result again?
That they don't get destroyed.
All right,
that they
good.
get added to.
Well,
okay.
Let's see how long that
And
result
she
lasts.
does stress that this is not that different than a particular idea in power.
Yeah.
Destroying something like ISIS destroying great Middle Eastern,
Yeah, well,
ancient
look,
Middle Eastern
it all
artworks.
comes back to Hamilton. Hamilton says, who gets to tell the story? The victors tell the story, right?
That's true.
Yeah. Is that right, Sadie?
Okay, quickly. In
that a yes?
Frenchtown, in Frenchtown,
Yes.
there's a kind of arts happening place called Art Yard.
Frenchtown, New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Yes.
Okay.
We found
Home
it.
of Love and
Oven.
Oven. And one of our favorite restaurants. Absolutely. And now we know the story behind Art Yard. Because there is this guy, Stephen McDonald. And he's the founder of Applegate Farms. You've probably seen Applegate Farms in the Whole Foods. Okay.
It's like smoked
naturally
meats.
made bacon, sausages, etc. Okay, he's the founder of this. It's a long story, but somehow he stumbled into. He went to Hampshire College.
Yeah.
Where there are a lot of free thinkers.
That's why I ended up in the smoked meats. Most people wouldn't
Well,
really go
the
in that direction.
idea of doing natural smoked meats.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, he's sort of a varied career, but he bounced
the
around.
title of the article is "Sausage King and Queen,"
Yeah.
and his wife Jill Carney, whose father was an artist, and she grew up in places like Provincetown, living a very artsy, funky life.
Yeah.
And she said when she first married this sausage guy, people just excoriated them. I mean, vegetarians are in, not sausage.
They were not
makers.
high in the social
So
circle.
here's what happened. They're on vacation in Florence. He has a stroke, a major stroke, and it changes his whole perspective on life. Now, he does do an amazing job of rehabilitating, and everybody's thinking he will not be able to do anything, and he really is able to. The main thing he does is he sells his business to Hormel
Right.
for $100 million.
That improved his health significantly.
Yes. Well, it actually did. His wife was panicked when he was in the hospital. She's thinking, I can't run a sausage company. And she doesn't have to. Hormel does. But it also enabled them to have enough money to really facilitate his rehabilitation. So that was one thing. And the other thing is, she grew up in, Provincetown among artists, and she, having all kinds of crazy celebrations and art events. So she wanted to do that in her own life. And so they bought the property where, remember Elizabeth Gilbert's Eat, Pray, Love shop?
Yeah, but let's bring it home. It is attached to Love and Oven. It's the space right next to Love and Oven. It's not just in Frenchtown.
They own the property that Love and Oven is on.
I understand.
Yeah,
so
they are the...
So this is a Love and Oven event we're talking about here. The art yard is connected with Love and Oven.
Oh.
You see, that's what I want Granger and Nico to appreciate.
They're the landlords of Love and Oven.
That's right. So this is a story, it's all about smoked meats. That's where Love and Oven comes from. And not really, but they're the landlord now. But let me ask you this, Thames, because I read the article, which was kind of poorly written. And I know you read it too, and maybe you can understand this. Are they now developing an alternative site for Art Yard that's different from this?
No. Here's a couple of things.
Yeah.
Number one, their home is in Irwina.
Which we've been to.
Which is not too far from Lymeport.
It's where the Golden Pheasant is.
It's where the R.I.P. Golden Pheasant,
the
one of
erstwhile
our favorite
Golden
restaurants has been sold,
right,
closed down.
But
and it used to belong to S.J. Perlman.
Right.
Okay, so it's got this whole Bucks County artist sort of legacy to it.
But what's happening to Art Yard?
Art Yard is expanding. You know how when we go around the corner before we get to Bridge Street Cafe, and there are all those pipes sticking up out of the ground, the construction's going on?
That's the thing?
They're expanding. They bought this hatchery, and they're building a new performance
That's going to be huge.
site. It's going to be huge.
Yeah, so this is it's an empty space now for two reasons. One is they're doing construction here, which seems to have a long way to go. And the other is Colosso's, rumored to be the best pizza in the Northeast, exploded a few months ago when a car went off over the curb and ran into this pizza place, and the pizza place exploded. Isn't that
This is totally off topic.
I'm just telling you, that's happening on all this corner. It's off topic.
No, that's a totally different corner.
It's geographically linked. It's in the center of Frenchtown.
No.
All right, well, now I understand. So the Art Yard's going to be there to stay. That's good news for Julie. She's got the same landlord.
And his wife, Jill Carney, are on the job.
Who's a little bit of a nutcase, according to this article, but we'll leave that for another day. I think that's a fair statement.
Lyme disease.
Yes, Lyme disease.
All right, so I'm reading this. Let me just say, a lot of obituaries in July. I don't know if it's the heat.
Yeah, it is the heat. It is the heat.
But when there's such a big page
the smoke
of
meats,
the death notices in the New York Times, because I like the little people. These are not the big famous. I founded the ticket booth in Times Square.
You think that was a big time obituary?
Well, it got they didn't have to pay for it. These people.
This is a paid obituary.
This is a paid obituary
my God.
of Mary Polly Luckett Murray.
Oh, I know. You get credit for that.
85 years old.
Yes.
Okay. She grew up in Beaches, in New Jersey and Rhode Island, so we have a lot in common with her. She was rather a good artist. She has works of art all over the place. But the interesting thing is, at a certain point, she and her husband are raising their family in Lyme, Connecticut. And this is in 1975. She writes a letter. Her children, several of her children, have been diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. Her husband and son had strange but similar rashes, and she knew others in the area. She makes a chart of all these people in Lyme who have these symptoms and sends it to a doctor, someone somewhere at Yale, Dr. Alan Steer, who's in rheumatology at Yale. And basically she discovered Lyme disease, which has become even a bigger and bigger problem. I've had it twice myself. So thank you, Polly, for figuring that out and bringing it to everybody.
Yeah, I didn't realize.
At first, it's called Lyme arthritis.
Yeah.
They just thought it was a form of arthritis. It can result with those kind of symptoms. And it affects the joints, etc. But it was, basically a housewife noticing what was going on in her town.
I've driven by Lyme like about 100 times. This is really going to affect my drives through Eastern Connecticut a lot.
All right, well, just remember Polly when you drive through.
All right, so here's an article. This is our last article. It's about swimmers, so this will bring everybody in, except maybe Nico, Granger, and Sadie. More so someone like me, less so. But in any event, here's the deal.
I'm not sure I followed that.
It's a swimmer article.
That
You'll
was not
see.
your best joke.
You'll see this in a moment. Here's the deal. It's an article written by a guy named Richard Friedman. He says, one day, a few years ago, I was rushing from the pool, dripping wet, when a man with a Russian accent stopped me and said, "You must come and swim with the team." He says, I was in my early 50s, too old for the swim team, I thought, but the coach persisted. "I see you are a good swimmer." He said, I was intrigued. I joined. It turned out it was this sort of ragtag group of miscellaneous folks who got together to swim every morning at 5:30 in the morning. I joined it. We had a great time. We kind of were all simpatico. But we noticed that we weren't getting any faster. We were training with a swim team. We weren't getting faster. So a bunch of us got together and confronted Igor to grouse a little bit and to say, how come we're not getting faster? Ever the philosopher of the pool, Igor smiled and said, quote, "You are all confused. Speed is not the goal. It is the result of perfect, beautiful technique." He says, what we're here is to make you more beautiful swimmers, not to make you faster. And once you master the technique, you will automatically become faster. Got that? And Igor was right, but that's just sort of part of the point of the article. The point was, to the extent that they were rushing and trying to go faster, they were screwing up. To the extent they just gave themselves over to technique, they actually did improve their times. So what does Richard Friedman take from this? He says, well, I've been thinking a lot about this lesson lately. We all want to swim faster, and it was counterproductive the way we went about it. The same thing goes for happiness. Everybody wants to be happy, yet the more directly we pursue happiness, the more elusive it becomes. And then the article is about vacation planning and what it is about vacation and vacation planning that in some ways is counterproductive to happiness. You're excited about a vacation, you start planning, you start making hotel reservations, you start making restaurant reservations, you feel the pressure of trying to work it out perfectly, and before you know it, as you experience the whole vacation, you're not having a good time. Research shows that thinking too much about how to be happy actually backfires and undermines well-being. This is in part because all that thinking consumes a fair amount of time, and that itself is not enjoyable. He goes on to say that the best way to experience a vacation, which has some relevance to what we're doing here, is to just experience the vacation. And
on that note, I think we should go experience our vacation.
We will in just a second, but we're not quite finished. The point is this. Well, maybe it is that point. Maybe it's just what you're trying to say.
Can I just say, spoken like a true man who's never planned his own vacation.
Yes, well, that's true.
There's a parallel line of thought that says the moms are never off duty, even on vacation, because they're always planning the meals, they're always planning the schedule for the day, they're planning all the outings. So I'm sure he's going along while his wife is just planning everything for him.
Maybe.
That's a great setup for him. So I'm happy for this guy.
Whoa!
Yes. All right. Well, maybe there's something to that. But on a higher level, because we're not only moms, at a certain point your children grow up to some degree. Without,
Well, let's make it all women. How about that?
All right. My point is this. He says, look, maybe the way to have the vacation is simply hang out with friends doing something we like to do together. Study after study shows social relationships are the strongest, most consistent predictor of a happy life, not exactly what you do. In the end, happiness is just a side effect of living well. Just like speed can be the result of excellent swimming technique.
And here we are, full circle.
Exactly right. That's what I was trying to get to. Full circle.
Did he sound like one of your traffic controllers? All right. This has been great. And so we're signing off. This is Tamsen, Granger.
And Dan Abuhoff.
With Tamsen and Dan read the paper. See you next week. Back in America.
Bye-bye.